I have another creepy story for you. I got an email the other day from a woman called Andrea, and Andrea says that she can teleport, and she's pretty sure that she's been able to do it since she was a kid. Andrea would have these dreams where she would lift out of her body, she would see herself asleep on the bed, and she would float down the stairs, which I know is a common one, but she goes a step further, and she would be able to enter not only her house, she says that she was able to go in any of the houses on her street. She says that one day she went to a neighbour's house to drop something round for her mum, and the neighbour said come in, and when she went into the house, she knew where everything was because she had been there several times in her dreams. Andrea, she starts to confide in her best friends and her mum what's going on. She starts to tell them that in my dreams, I don't stay in my dreams, I go wandering. And of course, everyone in Andrea's life just thinks she has a vivid imagination. They take it all with a grain of salt. Until one night, her mum and dad are having a conversation downstairs about how Andrea doesn't want to go to this tutoring lesson that she has. Andrea, who's supposed to be upstairs asleep in her bed, isn't. Andrea, she's teleporting all around the place. And so when she hears her name coming out of her mum and dad's mouth, she's interested. So she goes into that kitchen and she listens to the conversation. And in the morning when she wakes up, she says, listen, don't even bother trying to trick me because I already know what you're doing. It's not going to work. How on earth did this girl know what we were saying? And Andrea, she says, I told you, I don't stay asleep. I walk around. This would go on for several more years with Andrea just randomly as a child finding out pieces of information, not only about her life, but about neighbours' house, etc. that she really shouldn't know, but she always somehow did. The most memorable times was when her mum and dad, they decide they're not going to stay together. And they decide that at first they're only going to tell their oldest child, who just happens to be out with her friends on a night out. And when she comes home, she sits down at the dining room table. Her mum and dad, who think all of the kids are upstairs sound asleep, and cannot hear them, they tell the oldest daughter, do you know what, we're actually not going to stay together. Well, Andrea hears this. In the morning, she repeats it to all of her other brothers and sisters. And again, the mum and dad are like, how on earth does this girl keep finding out everything? She must be listening. So the mum and dad, they carry out a little experiment in which one of them went upstairs and the other one would talk in like a hushed tone downstairs, and they're like, there is no way that this girl can hear from all the way up there. At some point after her mum and dad divorce, her mum remarries another guy, but Andrea doesn't like him, not even a little bit. And so one night when she goes on her wandering, she just decides, do you know what? I don't want to go back. And she had always gone back. So what would happen is she would go out, she would go on a little wander, go wherever the night took her, and then she would make sure that she was back in her body in time for school. But this particular night, she decides, I don't want to go back. I'm not happy there. Andrea described having to go home as kind of like being strapped into a roller coaster seat. You know, when you feel the force against you, like you feel the wind. She describes it as that. So she starts to get that feeling as if she's going home. And she would normally close her eyes, but this one time she didn't close her eyes. She left them open and she felt herself flicking through different time periods, and as she kept her eyes open, she saw all the different versions of her. Like she saw herself as an adult, she saw everything basically flash before her eyes. Normally she'd just be waiting to wake up in her body, but this particular night she made a conscious effort to stay awake in this process, and so she finds herself looking at herself and she decides, I'm not getting back in. And so she stands there and she starts to feel this impending sense of doom. Something is telling her, get back in there now, you have to go home. There's no actual voice telling her to get into the body, but she can just feel it. It's there. She knows that this thing exists and it is begging with her, get back in your body, almost like a parent would, but she doesn't. She just stands there. And then all of a sudden, this person appears next to her, and this person she's never seen before, but she looks to be around 15, 16 years old. And this person, without saying anything, puts these words into her head and said, come on now. You've got to get back into your body for your mum. And Andrea, she just looks this girl up and down like the petulant teenager that she was, and she just stands there for a few more minutes and she looks down at her body and she notices that the human her, the one that's still laying on her bed, starts to shake violently. And she's like, what the hell? And this girl, the one that's just standing there in silence, she just looks straight back at her, but this time she looks angry and she shoves Andrea forcibly, pushes her back inside her body. And when Andrea wakes up, she feels weird, she feels strange, and she is surrounded by her family. And this was the first time Andrea had ever had a fit or an episode. Andrea grows up, she meets her husband, and she tells her husband all about these like episodes or her night wandering, all of this that she can do. And her husband's very supportive, he kind of giggles, and she never really knows if he believes her or not, but either way, he never says anything like nasty, and he's very supportive when she's telling other people or like he's telling other people. She always feels like she is supported. She doesn't feel like he finds it a joke at all. They have a really happy marriage. In fact, they have 2 children, and she thinks everything is pretty good, apart from the fact that when she's with him, when she would wake up of a night time and she would go to wonder, the person laying next to her was not her husband, but like some sort of black smoke that surrounded him. And she could never really understand why this would happen, because when she would sleep in a bedroom with her mum or her sister or anyone else, it would just be their body. There was no smoke, but he had smoke around him. She got older and she started to stay awake to do night feeds and things like that. These episodes and the night wandering, they kind of stopped. And so she just kind of assumed that this was something that she could do as a child and that it wouldn't follow her into adulthood. Weird thing was that night when Andrea had kept her eyes open and she said that her whole life had flashed before her eyes, the thing that had happened like decades before, in that she got a glimpse of her future. And even though she couldn't really remember like the specifics of things, she knew, even when she married this man, that they would not stay married. She knew that this marriage would eventually end. And this is when these specific dreams of this specific house start to happen. So of a night time, she would wake up in her wandering state and her body would take her to this particular house, and it had a very distinct door. But when she would get there, she couldn't get in. Normally, she could just walk through as if the door wasn't there. But in this dream, she couldn't do that. She would get as far as the door, and that was that. She starts to confide in her friends and in her family and in her husband. She starts to say, I keep seeing this door. This is what it looks like. I don't know what it means. It's really odd. I've never had dreams like this. Her husband and everyone else, they're like, yeah, that's very strange. But life goes on until one day she is out and they are walking with their 2 children. It's her husband and their 2 children. And they're going to the park. And they walk past that very house with that very specific door. She can't believe her eyes. This is the door from her dream. And so she's like, this is the door. This is the house. This is the door. And her husband, he says, oh, okay, how weird, like, how strange. Maybe you just saw it driving past one day. And she's like, yeah, maybe that's exactly what it is. And she puts it to the back of her mind. But then that night, for the first time in like 20 years, Andrea has a dream of that girl, you know, the one that pushed her back into her body. She has a dream about her. And in her dream, that girl takes her hand and she takes her to the door of that house. And Andrea tries to get in again and she can't get in. But the girl, she opens that door and she lets her in. And inside is her husband with another woman. She's able to hear the entire conversation that her husband is having with this woman. And they are talking about Andrea and the fact that she's so mentally unstable and she thinks she has these dreams, or she's pretending to have these dreams in which she remembers this girl's door, when actually she just knows that her husband's having an affair and she's trying to get him to admit it. But actually, Andrea had no idea about the affair, and this was the first that she was learning about it. Once her husband about it, not only does she confront him, but she tells him word for word what was said in that room, and he is blown away. He can't believe that she is able to know exactly what was said behind closed doors. He is still to this day convinced that she was able to listen to him through some sort of listening device. And that was how Andrea found out that her husband was having an affair with a girl that he worked with. And another thing that is completely unexplainable is the girl that took Andrea to the door and also pushed her back into her body turned out to be a girl who her mum had known as a teenager who died in a car crash. And they'd been very close, and they had said to each other, if we ever had children, you could be the godmother. She said when she'd been a child and this girl had pushed her, she'd not really taken the time to really look at her. But as an adult, when she'd looked at what she was wearing, she realised that it was of a different time era, a time before her. And that's when she asked her mum, could this be someone you know? And that's when her mum said, yeah, I went to school with a girl and it sounds very much like her. They looked at pictures, and that's when they realised that this girl was basically acting as like a guardian. Andrea left her loser husband, but she said that that was a massive wake-up call for her, that you never really know someone and you never really know how they speak about you behind closed doors, because she had no idea that her husband found her to be a joke, let alone the fact that he was having an affair. She did eventually remarry, and her husband this time round is actually very supportive of her. And Andrea even says that she has a granddaughter who has inherited her gift.